The crystal chamber floated in the darkness between stars, a monument to power that had lasted for 10,000 years. And inside it, the rulers of 12 species gathered to decide the fate of humanity. Ambassador Thelvok moved through the entrance like flowing water, his body made of living mercury that caught the light of distant suns and scattered it across the walls in dancing patterns. And behind him came the others, each one stranger than the last. The pale ones arrived first, their skin so white it seemed to glow, their eyes like pools of black oil that reflected nothing. And they took their seats without a word, because the pale ones rarely spoke unless they meant to kill. The crystalline hierarchy came next. Beings of living glass whose bodies chimed with every movement like wind through hollow bells. And they arranged themselves in perfect geometric patterns, because chaos offended their ancient sensibilities. The swarm representatives entered as a single mass of clicking insects that moved with one mind. And the void swimmers phased through the walls themselves, because doors were beneath their kind. And the stone fathers sat so still they might have been statues until you noticed their eyes, tracking every movement in the room. 12 species in total, each one masters of their corner of the galaxy, each one ancient beyond human reckoning. And today they had gathered to discuss what they called the human problem. Thelvok took his place at the speaking plinth and activated the holographic display. And suddenly, the chamber was filled with images of a small blue-green world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, honored members of the Grand Conclave. Thelvok began, his voice like mercury sliding over glass. I present to you the species known as humanity. The images shifted to show human beings in all their strange variety. Soft creatures with fragile skin and limited senses. Beings who lived barely a century before their bodies failed them. And several counselors made sounds of amusement at the sight. They emerged from their homeworld approximately 200 of their years ago, Thelvok continued. And in that brief time, they have spread to 17 colony worlds across 3 star systems. Insects, clicked the swarm representatives in perfect unison. They breed like insects, indeed, Thelvok agreed. And like insects, they have now infested territory that belongs to the Dominion. The display zoomed in on a world called Meridian 4, a planet of vast oceans and scattered continents where approximately 2 million humans had built their homes and raised their children and planted their flags. This world lies within the borders established by the Treaty of Silent Stars, Thelvok explained. And the humans have refused all requests to withdraw their population. One of the Stone Fathers spoke for the first time, his voice like grinding boulders. Then we remove them ourselves. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber, because this was how things had always been done. And the Dominion had crushed 100 species who had dared to challenge their authority. Thelvok raised a hand for silence, and the room obeyed, because even among equals some were more equal than others. The military council has already prepared a response, he announced. And a new figure appeared in the holographic display. Admiral Sirkith of the Pale Ones was tall even by the standards of his kind. His white skin stretched tight over a frame that seemed too thin to hold together, and his black eyes held the cold patience of a predator who had never known defeat. I will lead the Crimson Tide against the human colony, Sirkith declared, his voice soft and terrible. 200 warships against their 16 defenders. Laughter echoed through the crystal chamber, wet and clicking and chiming depending on who made the sound. Because the idea of 16 ships standing against 200 was absurd beyond measure. What do we know of their capabilities? Asked one of the crystalline hierarchy. More out of curiosity than concern. Zirith gestured, and the display filled with technical readouts and weapon specifications, and ship designs that looked crude and primitive. Compared to Dominion technology, they use fusion drives for propulsion, the Admiral explained. kinetic weapons that fire metal projectiles, and ablative armor that burns away under sustained fire. Stone Age technology, rumbled one of the Stone Fathers. They might as well throw rocks. Their tactics are equally primitive, Sirkith continued. They favor direct engagement over strategic maneuvering, and their commanders seem to value aggression over caution. The tactical oracle, an ancient machine intelligence that had predicted the outcome of 10,000 battles, processed all available data and rendered its judgment in a voice that had no emotion. Estimated time to total human capitulation, it announced. 6 standard rotations. 6 rotations for 16 ships, laughed the swarm representatives. Surely that is generous. The Oracle accounts for all variables, Thelvok assured them, including the possibility of unexpected resistance. Admiral Sirkith smiled, an expression that looked wrong on his pale face. I expect the humans will surrender before we fire a single shot. But if they choose to fight, then their destruction will serve as a lesson to other young species who might challenge Dominion authority. The counselors voiced their approval because this was proper and right and the natural order of things. And soon the matter would be settled, and they could move on to more important business. But in the corner of the chamber, hidden in shadows that seemed to cling to her ancient form, the listener remained silent. She was old, older than any species represented in the chamber. Old enough to remember when the Dominion was young and hungry and weak. And in her long existence, she had watched 10,000 species rise and fall like waves upon a shore. When the laughter faded and the counselors turned to leave, one of the crystalline hierarchy noticed her stillness and asked if she had wisdom to share. The listener lifted her head, and her eyes were like windows into a darkness that had no end. And when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of ages beyond counting. We have seen their ships, she said slowly. We have measured their weapons and counted their numbers and calculated their defeat, and found them wanting, agreed Thelvok with satisfaction. But we have not seen what humans do when they are cornered, the listener continued. We have not witnessed how they respond when their children are threatened, and their homes are burning, and their backs are against the wall. Admiral Sirkith dismissed her concerns with a wave of his pale hand. They will do what every species does when facing overwhelming force. They will break and run, or they will kneel and beg. The listener said nothing more because she had lived long enough to know that some lessons could only be learned through blood. And she settled back into her shadows to wait for the screaming to begin. The Crimson Tide launched 3 cycles later. 200 warships carrying enough firepower to crack a planet. And as they disappeared into the void between stars, the counselors of the Grand Conclave returned to their comfortable certainties. They did not know that they had just made the worst mistake in the history of their ancient civilization. They would learn soon enough. 3 cycles before the Crimson Tide was scheduled to arrive at Meridian 4, a small human vessel appeared at the edge of Dominion space and requested permission to approach the Grand Conclave. The request caused some confusion among the communication officers because no species had ever voluntarily approached the Dominion seat of power, and certainly not a species that was about to be crushed under the weight of 200 warships. Thelvok considered refusing the request, but curiosity got the better of him, and he reasoned that it might be amusing to hear the humans beg for mercy before their world burned. The human ship was small and ugly, a thing of sharp angles and exposed machinery that looked like it had been built by children playing with scrap metal. And when it docked with the crystal chamber, several counselors moved away from the airlock as though afraid of contamination. The door opened and Commander Elena Vasquez stepped through. She was shorter than most of the beings in the chamber, her skin brown and weathered like old leather, her hair pulled back from a face that showed the marks of 50 years of hard living, and her eyes were the color of storm clouds over an angry sea. She wore no ceremonial robes and carried no gifts of tribute, and showed none of the fear that the counselors expected from a pawn shot. representative of a doomed species. Instead, she walked to the fine, speaking plinth like she owned it. And when she spoke, her voice was calm and steady and held not a single trace of submission. "I am Commander Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Defense Force," she announced. "And I have come to deliver a message from humanity to the Veshtari Dominion." Thelvok flowed forward, his mercury body catching the light. "We know who you are, human, and we know why you have come. So let us save time and proceed directly to your surrender." Vasquez looked at him the way a teacher might look at a student who had said something foolish. "I have not come to surrender." Silence fell across the chamber because no one spoke to a Dominion ambassador that way. No one who wanted to keep breathing. "Then you have come to beg," suggested one of the pale ones with cruel amusement. "To plead for the lives of your colonists before Admiral Sirkith turns their world to ash." "I have not come to beg either," Vasquez replied. And there was something in her voice that made several counselors shift uncomfortably in their seats. She turned to address the full chamber, meeting each alien gaze without flinching. And when she spoke again, her words carried across the crystal walls like hammer blows. "I have come to inform you that Meridian 4 is our home. Its people are under the protection of Earth, and any attack against them will be answered." The laughter that followed was loud and long and came from every corner of the chamber. And Vasquez stood in the center of it all without moving, without reacting. Without looking away, Admiral Sirkith appeared in holographic form beside the plinth. His pale face twisted with amusement. "Answered," he repeated. And what answer could 16 primitive ships possibly provide against the Crimson Tide? Vasquez smiled. And something about the expression made the laughter die faster than it should have. The translation system rendered her smile as baring teeth in non-aggressive threat display, but that description failed to capture the cold promise in her. She reached into her uniform and produced a small data chip, which she placed on the speaking plinth with the careful precision of someone laying down a loaded weapon. "This chip contains the complete military history of humanity," she explained. "Every war we have ever fought, every battle we have ever won or lost, every weapon we have ever created." Thelvok gestured, and the chip was scanned by Dominion systems. Its contents verified as authentic human records, dating back thousands of years. "We have waged war against each other since before we could write," Vasquez continued. "We have killed billions of our own kind over territory and resources and ideas, and sometimes, just because we could." The images from the chip began to play across the chamber, showing scenes that made even the most hardened counselors pause. Ancient warriors charging across blood-soaked fields with swords raised high, cities burning under clouds of fire and smoke, trenches filled with the dead and dying while weapons roared overhead. Mushroom clouds rising over flattened ruins where millions had lived just moments before. "We have developed every possible method of killing," Vasquez said as the images continued to flow. "We have poisoned the air and the water and the earth. We have split the atom and harnessed the power of suns. We have created diseases that could wipe out entire populations and machines that could think faster than any living mind." She paused to let the weight of her words settle over the chamber. "And through all of this, we survived. We adapted, we learned, and we kept going." Admiral Sirkith studied the images with cold, analytical eyes. "You expect us to be impressed by your barbarism, human. But all I see is evidence that your species is barely civilized." "I expect nothing," Vasquez replied. "I am simply showing you what you are provoking. Because the Dominion has never faced an enemy like us. We have crushed 100 species who thought themselves special." Thelvok reminded her. "What makes humanity any different?" Vasquez turned to face him directly. And in that moment, the Mercury ambassador felt something he had not experienced in centuries. He felt uncertain. Every species you have conquered was peaceful before you attacked them. Vasquez said quietly. They had to learn violence when you arrived at their doorstep. They had to invent war when it was forced upon them. She gestured at the images still playing around the chamber, showing tanks and bombers and soldiers with faces empty of mercy. We did not have to learn violence, she continued. We mastered it long before we reached for the stars. We perfected the art of killing while we were still trapped on our single blue world. And we have had thousands of years to refine our techniques. The chamber was quiet now, and even the swarm representatives had stopped their constant clicking. Meridian 4 has 2 million people, Vasquez concluded. They are farmers and miners and teachers and children who just want to live their lives in peace. But if you threaten them, then you threaten Earth. She began walking back toward the airlock, her boots echoing in the silence. And Earth does not forget, she said without turning around. Earth does not forgive, and Earth does not lose. After she was gone, the counselors dismissed her words as the desperate posturing of a doomed species. And the data chip was filed away in the archives, where it would gather dust alongside 1,000 other forgotten warnings. Admiral Sirkith confirmed that the Crimson Tide would proceed on schedule, and the matter was considered closed. Only the listener reviewed the files on that data chip, spending long hours studying the history of human violence with growing unease. She saw the trenches of the Western Front, and the ruins of Hiroshima, and the killing fields of Cambodia, and the endless wars that had shaped humanity into something hard and sharp and dangerous. And when she was finished, she retreated to her shadows and waited, because she knew with terrible certainty that the Dominion had just refused the only chance it would ever have to avoid what was coming. The humans had tried to warn them. They had chosen not to listen. The Crimson Tide emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of angry hornets. 200 warships spreading across the void in perfect formation, their weapons hot and their shields humming with barely contained power. Admiral Sirkith stood on the bridge of his flagship, the eternal silence, and watched Meridian 4 grow larger in the view screen until he could see the blue of its oceans and the green of its continents and the tiny lights of human cities glittering on the night side. Tactical report, he commanded his second officer, a young pale one with eager eyes. Studied the sensor readings with growing confusion. Admiral, we have located the human defense fleet and their disposition. They are not moving, sir. Their engines appear to be cold and their weapons are unpowered. Sirkith frowned, because this was not what he had expected. Show me. The view screen shifted to display the 16 human ships arranged in a loose sphere around the planet, hanging motionless in the darkness like abandoned toys. And for a moment, Sirkith wondered if the humans had simply given up. Perhaps they have accepted the inevitable, suggested his second officer. Perhaps, Sirkith agreed. Though something felt wrong in ways he could not explain, he activated the communication array and broadcast on all standard frequencies, his voice echoing across the void to reach every human ear in the system. Attention, human vessels. This is Admiral Sirkith of the Veshtari Dominion. You are ordered to power down your ships and surrender your crews for processing. Your colonists will be removed from this world and relocated to a designated reservation. Resistance will result in your immediate destruction. He waited for a response. None came. The 16 human ships remained silent, their running lights dim, their engines dark, their weapons still and cold. They are afraid, laughed one of the bridge officers. They know they cannot win, so they hide like prey animals, hoping the predator will lose interest. Sirkith was not so sure, because prey animals did not arrange themselves in defensive formations. Prey animals did not position themselves between the predator and what they wanted to protect. Launch the first wave, he ordered. 50 ships should be more than sufficient. The Crimson Tide divided like a living thing. 50 warships breaking away from the main formation and accelerating toward the human defenders. their weapons charging with the distinctive whine of energy. Building toward release, Richt watched them approach the human line, counting down the seconds until optimal firing range. And he found himself holding his breath without knowing why. At 17 minutes into the engagement window, the lead Dominion ship crossed into weapons range, and the humans moved. What happened next would haunt Sirkith for the rest of his very short life. The 16 human ships exploded into motion, so fast that the Dominion sensors struggled to track them. Cold engines becoming brilliant stars in the darkness. Silent running lights blazing into full combat illumination. They did not form a defensive line. They did not retreat toward the planet. They attacked. Human ships tore into the Dominion formation like wolves among sheep, their crude kinetic weapons roaring with a sound that should not have been possible in the vacuum of space. Their missiles screaming toward targets with the eager hunger of living things. "Return fire!" Sirkith screamed. All ships returned fire. The Dominion vessels responded with precision and overwhelming force. Energy beams cutting through the darkness. Torpedoes tracking and closing and detonating against human hulls. Direct hits, dozens of them. Enough firepower to crack asteroids, and the humans kept coming. Zirek watched in disbelief as a human cruiser took 3 direct hits to its primary hull. Fire blooming in the void where atmosphere escaped through ragged wounds. And instead of breaking off the attack, the crippled ship accelerated toward the nearest Dominion destroyer and rammed it at full speed. Both ships died in a flower of light and debris. "They are insane," whispered his second officer, but it was not insanity that drove the humans. It was something far worse. It was purpose. The human ships fought like nothing the Dominion had ever encountered, each vessel supporting the others in patterns that seemed random until the killing blow fell. Their pilots anticipating attacks before they came. Their gunners finding weak points that should have been impossible to detect. The human frigate, its engines destroyed and its hull burning, launched its escape pods not toward safety but toward a Dominion carrier. And the pods exploded on impact with enough force to breach the carrier's reactor core. A human destroyer, cut in half by concentrated fire, continued fighting with its forward section while its rear section drifted away, still shooting at anything that moved. And through it all, a human broadcast echoed across every frequency, filling the void with music and laughter, and voices that sounded like they were having the time of their lives. "This is Captain Maria Santos of the UED Unconquered," announced the woman's voice over the chaos of battle. "To any Dominion ship that can hear me, I want you to know something important. Her ship, the Unconquered, was bisected and venting atmosphere. Its weapons destroyed, its engines gone. Nothing left but a dying hulk tumbling through the debris field. We are not afraid of you," Santos continued. And the sensors showed she was still on her bridge, still commanding what was left of her crew, still fighting even as her ship fell apart around her. "We have spent our entire existence fighting things that wanted to kill us. Disease and famine and natural disasters and each other. We have stared into the void, and the void blinked first. We have faced extinction so many times that we have forgotten how to be afraid of death." Her ship was on a collision course with the Dominion flagship Seraph, screamed orders that no one could follow in time. "So come and take our world, if you can." Santos laughed, and she was laughing, actually laughing as her ship burned around her. "But know that every inch of ground will cost you blood, and we have so much more blood to give." The Unconquered struck the eternal silence at 300 kilometers per second. Zyrich died without ever understanding what he had awakened 11 minutes after the battle began. It was over 43 Dominion warships had been destroyed, including the flagship and Admiral Sirkith himself, and the remaining 7 vessels retreated in disarray. Their crews traumatized, their confidence shattered, their understanding of the universe fundamentally broken. the human fleet had been reduced to 4 functional ships. But those 4 ships held their position around Meridian 4, battered and bleeding but undefeated on the planet below. 2 million colonists looked up at the sky and saw the debris of battle falling like shooting stars. And they knew that their protectors had given everything to keep them safe in the crystal chamber of the Grand Conclave. The counselors received the battle footage in stunned silence. They watched their warriors die. They watched their certainties burn, and they began, for the first time in 10,000 years, to feel something they had forgotten existed: fear. The crystal chamber had never been so quiet. 12 species sat in stunned silence, their eyes fixed on the holographic display that showed the wreckage of 43 warships drifting through the void around Meridian 4. And no one seemed capable of finding words for what they had just witnessed. Thulva stood at the speaking plinth, his mercury body rippling with agitation that he could not control. And when he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "This is not possible." He turned to the tactical oracle, that ancient machine intelligence that had predicted the outcome of 10,000 battles without ever being wrong. "Explain this. Explain how 16 primitive ships destroyed 43 of our finest warships in 11 minutes. The oracle was silent for a long moment, processing data, running calculations, searching for patterns that might make sense of the impossible. "Recalculating," it announced. "Incorporating new variables." "What new variables?" demanded one of the crystalline hierarchy. "Human psychological resilience exceeds all projected parameters," the oracle replied. "Human pain tolerance exceeds all projected parameters. Human willingness to accept personal destruction in exchange for tactical advantage exceeds all projected parameters." "They should have surrendered," Thelvok insisted. "Every model showed they would surrender once they saw eyes of our fleet. The models were based on rational actors pursuing survival as their primary objective," the oracle explained. "Humans do not appear to prioritize survival in combat situations." "Then what do they prioritize?" The oracle processed the question for several seconds before answering. "Victory." The swarm representatives clicked nervously. But victory was impossible for them. The mathematics were clear. 16 ships cannot defeat 200 ships. The mathematics were incorrect, the oracle admitted. And there was something in its artificial voice that might have been shame. The mathematics assumed that a ship destroyed is a ship removed from combat. But human ships continue fighting after destruction. Human crews continue fighting after their ships are destroyed. Human pilots continue fighting after receiving wounds that should be fatal. The display shifted to show Captain Maria Santos on the bridge of the Unconquered. Her face bloody, her uniform burned, her ship literally falling apart around her. And she was laughing as she steered what remained of her vessel into the Dominion flagship. They used death as a weapon, the oracle concluded. This variable was not included in previous calculations. One of the Stone Fathers spoke, his voice grinding with barely contained fury. "Then we send more ships, 5,000, 10,000. Enough to overwhelm them, no matter how fiercely they fight. That course of action carries significant risk," the oracle warned. "What risk?" "They have 4 ships remaining. The humans have received word of the battle," the oracle explained. "And they are responding." The display changed to show sensor data from deep space observation posts, data that showed activity in the Sol system. Activity on a scale that made several counselors gasp. 12 colony ships are being converted to warships, the oracle reported. Human industrial facilities are operating at 300% capacity. Volunteer recruitment centers have reported lines extending for kilometers outside every major city on every human world. "How many volunteers?" asked Thelvok. "Current estimates suggest approximately 400 million humans have registered for military service in the past 48 hours. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. "That is more soldiers than the entire Dominion military," whispered one of the void swimmers. "The humans have sent a funny message," the oracle continued. And suddenly, Commander Vasquez appeared in the display, her storm gray eyes harder than they had been during her visit to the conclave. "People of the Dominion," she began, and her voice was calm in a way that was somehow more frightening than anger. "You attacked our colony. You killed our people. You learned that we do not surrender and we do not break." She paused to let her words sink in. "But I want to be clear about something important. The ships you faced at Meridian 4 were not our military. They were our militia. Farmers and miners and teachers who volunteered to protect their neighbors. People who had never fired a weapon in anger before your fleet arrived." The counselors exchanged uneasy glances. "You have not yet met our soldiers," Vasquez continued. "You have not yet faced the men and women who have trained their entire lives for war, who have studied every battle in human history and learned from every mistake we ever made, who have been waiting for an enemy worthy of their skills." Her image leaned forward, filling the display with her weathered face and cold eyes. "If you attack us again, you will meet them, and I promise you this. You will wish you had never heard the name humanity." The message-ended silence returned to the crystal chamber, heavier than before, thick with implications that no one wanted to examine too closely. "We need to reconsider our strategy," suggested one of the crystalline hierarchy. And for once no one argued. The listener emerged from her shadows, her ancient eyes sweeping across the assembled counselors with something that might have been satisfaction or might have been sorrow. "I warned you," she said quietly. "I told you that we had not seen what humans do when cornered. You did not tell us they were insane," snapped Thelvok. "They are not insane," the listener replied. "They are something far more dangerous. They are survivors." She gestured at the frozen image of Captain Santos, laughing in the face of death. "Every other species in this galaxy evolved in environments of relative safety," she explained. "Competition for resources? Yes. Predators to avoid, certainly. But nothing that required the constant refinement of violence as a survival trait." She turned to face the full chamber, her voice carrying the weight of millennia. "Humans evolved on a death world, a planet that tried to kill them every single day, through ice ages and plagues and predators and natural disasters. And they survived by becoming the most efficient killers their world had ever produced." "But they kill each other," protested one of the pale ones. "Their own records show billions of deaths in wars against their own kind." "Yes," the listener agreed. "They practice, constantly, relentlessly, perfecting their techniques against the only enemy challenging enough to make them better." She paused to let that sink in. Each other. The counselors looked at the battle footage with new eyes, seeing not chaos but choreography, not desperation but discipline, not madness but the terrible efficiency of a species that had been waging war since before they could write. "What do we do?" asked Thelvok. And for the first time in his long life, he sounded uncertain. A listener smiled, though there was no humor in it. "We pray that they accept our surrender," she said. "Because if they decide to come for us instead of waiting for us to come for them, there is nothing in this galaxy that will be able to stop them." The vote was called 3 hours later. It was not unanimous. Some counselors still wanted blood, still believed that enough firepower could solve any problem. But the majority had seen the footage and heard the message and looked into the eyes of Captain Maria Santos. As she laughed in the face of death, they chose survival as single. Diplomatic vessel was dispatched to Meridian 4, carrying an offer of peace that the Dominion had never made to any species in its 10,000-year history, because for the first time, the masters of the galaxy had met something they could not control, and they were afraid. The diplomatic vessel touched down on Meridian 4 3 cycles after the battle, settling onto a landing pad that still bore the scorch marks of debris that had fallen from the sky during the fighting. Ambassador Thelvok emerged alone, his mercury body dim and subdued, his movements careful and slow in a way that suggested he was trying very hard not to appear threatening. The humans who waited for him did not look like the conquerors he had expected. They looked tired, Commander. Elena Vasquez stood at the front of the welcoming committee, her uniform wrinkled, dark circles under her storm-gray eyes, and behind her stood a handful of soldiers who bore the same marks of exhaustion and grief. Ambassador, she said, a voice flat. Welcome to Meridian 4, Commander, Thelvok replied, and he found himself struggling to maintain his diplomatic composure in the presence of these small, fragile creatures who had somehow shattered everything he thought he knew about the universe. They walked together through the colony, past buildings that showed signs of hasty repairs, past memorials already being constructed for the crews who had died defending their home, past children who stopped playing to stare at the alien visitor with curious eyes. Your people do not seem afraid of me, Thelvok observed. They have seen worse than you. Vasquez replied simply. They reached a small conference room in the Colonial Administration Building, a plain space with a table and chairs and windows that looked out over the ocean. And Thelvok noticed that the chairs had been modified to accommodate his unusual form, a small courtesy, but one that spoke volumes. The Dominion has authorized me to offer full recognition of human territorial claims, Thelvok began once they were seated. Meridian 4 and all other human colonies will be acknowledged as sovereign human space, and the Dominion will withdraw all military assets from within 3 light years of your borders. Vasquez listened without expression. Additionally, Thelvok continued, the Dominion offers reparations for the lives lost in the recent conflict. The terms to be negotiated at your convenience. And in exchange, Vasquez asked. Thelvok hesitated, because the next words would cost him more than he wanted to admit. In exchange, we ask for peace. The word hung in the air between them, strange and unfamiliar. A word that the Dominion had never spoken to a species it had once marked for conquest. Vasquez studied him for a long moment, her gray eyes searching for deception and finding none. You are afraid of us, she said. Not a question. Yes. Why? Thelvok considered lying, considered offering diplomatic platitudes about mutual respect and the benefits of cooperation. But he had seen the footage of Captain Santos laughing as she died, and he knew that this human woman would see through any deception he attempted. Because we do not understand you, he admitted. Because you should have lost that battle and you won. Because you should have surrendered and you fought. Because everything we know about warfare and survival and rational behavior says that your species should not exist. And yet here you are. Vasquez almost smiled. We get that a lot. The Dominion has crushed 100 species, Thelvok continued. We have watched civilizations rise and fall. We have seen every possible response to overwhelming force. And none of them prepared us for what you did. What did we do? You refused to accept reality, Thelvok said. Your ships were outgunned and outnumbered. Your defeat was mathematically certain. And your people simply decided that the mathematics were wrong. Now Vasquez did smile, a small tired expression that held no joy. We have a saying on Earth, she said. It goes like this. It is not the size of the dog in the fight. It is the size of the fight in the dog. Thelvok processed this through his translator. I do not understand. You calculated our ships, Vasquez explained. You measured our weapons and counted our numbers and predicted our defeat. But you forgot to calculate the one variable that actually matters, which is us, she said simply. The people inside those ships, the minds behind those weapons, the hearts that refused to stop beating even when the universe told them they should. She leaned back in her chair, looking out the window at the ocean that sparkled in the afternoon sun. We have been fighting since we crawled out of the mud. She continued. We fought the animals that wanted to eat us, and we won. We fought the diseases that wanted to kill us, and we won. We fought the planet that wanted to freeze us and burn us and drown us, and we won. Her eyes returned to Thelvok, hard and bright. And then, when there was nothing left on Earth that could challenge us, we started fighting each other. Because that is who we are. That is what we do. We find the hardest thing in the universe and we beat it into submission, or we die trying. That sounds exhausting. Thelvok observed. It is, Vasquez agreed. But it is also why we are still here. Why we will always be here. Why nothing in this galaxy or any other will ever be able to wipe us out completely. She stood and extended her hand. A human gesture of agreement that Thelvok had studied but never experienced. We accept your peace, she said. Not because we are tired of fighting, not because we are afraid of what comes next, but because we have better things to do than spend our time killing creatures who have finally learned to leave us alone. Thelvok reached out with a tendril of mercury and wrapped it around her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin, the steady pulse of her heart, the quiet strength of a species that had earned its place among the stars the hard way. The Dominion will honor this agreement. He promised. Good, Vasquez replied. Because if you do not, we will come for you. And next time, we will not stop at 43 ships. The treaty was signed before the sun set on Meridian 4. And by the time Thelvok returned to the crystal chamber, the news had spread across the Dominion. Like wildfire, humanity had been granted full recognition. Equal status with species that had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to make fire. And the counselors who had laughed at Commander Vasquez just cycles before now spoke her name with quiet respect, only the listener seemed unsurprised by the outcome years later. When scholars studied the brief war that had changed the balance of power in the galaxy, they would seek her out to ask why the Dominion had so badly miscalculated she would receive them in her shadowed chambers, her ancient eyes distant with memories that spanned ages beyond counting. And she would offer only a single observation: every other species, when facing extinction, seeks to escape it, she would say, they run or they hide or they surrender, because survival is their highest priority, and humans are different. The listener would nod slowly, her form shifting in the darkness. Humans do not run from death, she would explain. They have faced it so many times in so many forms that they have forgotten how to be afraid of it. She would pause, letting her words settle over her visitors like a cold wind. They have learned to use it, and far across the galaxy, on a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, humanity continued to do what it had always done. It survived. It grew stronger, and it waited. With the patient confidence of a species that had already beaten the worst the universe could throw at it, for whatever challenge came next, because they were human and humans do not lose.